Oregon and Washington have met 115 times, but this is the first time they're both ranked in the top 10. Erik Skopil of DuckTerritory.com and Chris Fetters of Dogman.com joining me now to break down this game. The Ducks have dominated the series recently, winning 15 of the last 18 meetings, but the Huskies coming in with a 12-game win streak, the second longest active win streak in the FBS. Lots of fireworks coming in this one. Both teams ranking in the top 3 in points per game, yards per game, and offensive efficiency. Now, the outcome of this game has major impacts on who wins the Pac-12 and who makes a possible trip to the college football playoff. So, Erik, what would a win mean for Oregon's side?
Well, it certainly keeps their dreams of making a college football playoff, returning something they haven't done in nearly a decade now, intact. And obviously this year is different in the Pac-12, where this isn't the only big-time game they will play. It sets them up, though, to, I guess, have a little bit smaller margin for error if they were to lose. Winning this game, though, would be significant. And I think it's really fun, someone who's grown up in the Pacific Northwest and lived in both states, to have both these programs where they are. Traditionally, either Washington was really good and Oregon wasn't very good, or Oregon was really good and Washington kind of had some down years. This is the first time, or I guess maybe this last 3 to 4 years, where both teams have been on this kind of upward trajectory, and it's fun to see them meeting now in a game with top 10, marquee game like this, that both teams will, have really good offenses and have defenses that I think can hopefully, throw some wrenches into some plans.
I definitely echo Erik's sentiments in terms of the teams being really right together now for the first time in quite a while. I mean, really, when you look at it, last year's game was such a big-time game with two top 25 teams really going at it in Eugene. The final quarter was amazing. And so the build-up to this game is even going to be more electric, obviously, with all the things that are going on outside the game as well. But a win for Washington, that just catapults Michael Penix Jr. right into the top of the Heisman Trophy race for sure. Obviously keeps alive all of their hopes in terms of a conference championship, a playoff berth, all of those things. So there's no question. I mean, Washington hasn't had a top 10 matchup at home in Husky Stadium since 2016. And that's when they took on top 10 Stanford and beat them 44-6. So there's an opportunity for Washington here to really put their stamp on the national stage, really go after it, and really kind of put their name out there as a legitimate national championship caliber team.
Well, Chris, you mentioned it. Michael Penix Jr., the new odds-on favorite to win the Heisman, and that's despite not even playing a game last week. He ranks top 3 in the nation in just about every passing category, but he was held without a passing touchdown last time out against Arizona. So what do you expect from him this week?
Yeah, that Arizona game was really fascinating, Grace, because Arizona really did everything they could to limit Washington from being able to take the top off their defense. They kept everything underneath. They only allowed the kind of the quick game, the game in the flats, and yet Michael Penix still threw for 363 yards. In fact, talking to Washington receivers coach Jamarcus Shepard this week, this was the first game he can remember where the receivers and running backs got more of their yards, the yards after catch, than he would consider his yards, which are the actual receiving yards. So I think this was a good game, that Arizona game, to really show that Michael Penix is good at taking the easy money when it's afforded him. They still need to make sure that they can take those shots over the top, because that has been a big hallmark of their season to date. But I think it was really important for them to show some variety against Arizona, and then also the fact that they played a 4-quarter game, which I think is something that they really, really needed to do. Not just Michael Penix, but the entire team.
And this matchup for Oregon is obviously really significant. Last year's game with Washington, Penix threw for over 400 yards. That's still the most by an opposing quarterback in the Dan Lanning era. And let's be real, like Oregon kind of had to look itself in the mirror this offseason and really adjust some of the things it wanted to do defensively. From a personnel perspective, they went out and were very aggressive in the transfer portal, adding numerous guys that are either whether they're starters or spot players who are going to be, I think, obviously very involved in this week's game plan. This is a game that was looked at last year as one that maybe Oregon had to make some adjustments, and it was year one under Lanning, and he wanted to go build his defense anyway. But I think there was extra motivation considering the rivalry with these two teams and how much last year's loss meant. that they needed to make some changes, and they've done that. And so far, it's been pretty damn impressive. They're the 5th-ranked pass defense in the country. You look at the game with Colorado, which is probably the closest thing Oregon has faced to Washington this year. Obviously, nowhere near the same caliber of skill talent, but a highly prolific pass offense. And Oregon held Shedeur Sanders under 160 yards passing. So improvements have been made, but all year this has kind of been looked at as the big test to kind of check and see how much improvements have really been made.
We'll talk about the Ducks offense now. Bo Nix, one of the most efficient passers in the country. His 80% completion rate leading the nation. But there's home Bo and then there's road Bo. So Erik, which one shows up this weekend?
Well, I think that's the big question. Oregon's had 2 road games this year. The one at Texas Tech, I don't think Nix played particularly poorly, but the offense wasn't at its best. There's no question about it. And this last game at Stanford on the road, that's just a different environment. The offense actually took some time to find a rhythm in that one as well. So it's worth noting, Nix's splits have not been nearly as favorable on the road as in terms of home, especially at Auburn. At Oregon, he's been pretty darn good away from home. And I think this is a game where, similar to Penix, and Chris is right in terms of this is a game for Penix to position himself in the Heisman Trophy race. I think Bo Nix has an opportunity to do something similar here. And this is a year where, my case before the year was for Bo was, hey, they play Washington, then they play USC later in the year. Those are 2 of the other, big-time Heisman Trophy candidates, and an opportunity this weekend to knock one of them off would certainly be significant in his case.
Yeah, and I agree 100% with Erik. I think this whole concept of road Bo, that's an Auburn thing. I don't think that's necessarily an Oregon thing at all. He's been so much better on the road since getting to Eugene. That being said, I guarantee you the crowd at Husky Stadium is going to do everything that they can to try to affect Bo Nix, to try to, create false starts on the offensive line or do whatever they can to try to make Bo Nix uncomfortable, because that's going to be a huge part of what Washington needs to do defensively to win this game. But everyone knows how talented Bo Nix is. In fact, last year's game against Washington and Eugene, very, very first play, he runs for first down. I mean, he was a legitimate running threat from the very beginning of that game. And I thought he had actually a really, really good game until he got hurt running the ball near the goal line against Alex Cook. So that was a big factor in that game. And that ultimately, I think if you talk to a lot of fans, Washington and Oregon fans, they'd probably say that was maybe the defining play of that particular game, because it really affected things moving forward. But there's no question. Anything Washington can do defensively, get the crowd involved, all those things, they need to do all that to try to get Bo Nix uncomfortable, because it really all starts with him.
All right, if it came down to one player who could change the game, the X factor, Chris, who would that be for you?
Well, I think obviously, again, with the quarterbacks the way they are, Heisman stage and all this type of thing, it's hard not to look at Michael Penix, but everyone knows about Penix. The guy that I think that, people nationally really need to pay attention to, especially since he's missed the last couple of games, is receiver Jalen McMillan. Jalen McMillan is a guy that can really do it all. He's been their punt returner. He's run the ball out of the backfield. Ryan Grubb, Washington's offensive coordinator, has tried to do so much to get him the ball in any way, shape, or form that he can. And the fact that he's missed the last couple of games, Kalen DeBoer, Washington's head coach, said that he was really, really close to getting a chance to play at Arizona. The fact that he didn't get to do that and then had the bye week on top of it, we all know he's chomping at the bit to get in this game and make a difference, because he really made a big difference at Oregon last year. I think over 120 passing yards. Jamarcus Shepard said that the play that he's going to remember the most from that Washington-Oregon game last year was the catch that he made against Christian Gonzalez when they went down together, and it was a 50-50 fight, and Jalen McMillan came up with the ball. And that seemed to really kind of energize that Washington sideline and get them going early in that game. So if I had to pick one guy from Washington that I'm really looking forward to see how he's going to affect this game, it's receiver Jalen McMillan.
It's probably a mistake that this is the first time I've really talked about these Washington receivers, because to me, that's the big focal point. And conversely for Oregon, it's can they defend him? I mean, there's probably 3 guys that are early draft picks in that Washington receiver room. And I'm not sure if my guy, which is Kyrie Jackson, the Oregon's top corner, who he'll be faced on, if it'll be Jalen McMillan, if it'll be Rome Odunze, if it'll be Jalen Polk, or how much they'll mix these guys up. But last year, Christian Gonzalez was really kind of a game-changing addition for Oregon at corner through the portal. They were looking to replace him, obviously, after he was a first-round draft pick a year ago. And this is the guy that they found. That former Alabama player, kind of a spot starter, had some nice moments at Bama, but has really blossomed, especially over the last couple of weeks before the bye week, and into somebody who I think has some attention from some NFL draft scouts. And this is certainly an opportunity this weekend against some really high-end NFL caliber receivers at Washington to put himself on display and to maybe make a statement that, hey, Oregon had Christian Gonzalez last year. He was a first-round draft pick. Maybe I'm somebody that needs to be in that kind of conversation too.
All eyes on Seattle this weekend. Thanks, Erik and Chris, for breaking it down. And for more on this top 10 matchup, check out dogman.com and ducksterritory.com. Our guys are keeping you up to date on all Washington and Oregon football and recruiting news all year long.